101.5 WDCM, where it's 8:38 and 42 degrees. And in the studio with us now, probably the most accomplished musician we've ever had sitting with us, Eliot Lewis. And for those of you that don't know the name, you probably know some of the bands he's played with, Average White Band and Hall & Oates. And Eliot, thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much for having me. This is great. Good to be here.
Now, Eliot will be performing tonight over at Buffalo Wild Wings, and it's a unique show. It's not something that you see too often, especially in Marion, as you're a multi-instrumentalist.
I am, yeah.
And you're going to play several instruments while you're doing your show tonight.
Well, what I do is, I often call myself a confused musician. I really don't know what to play. Actually, my solo show is really more guitar-based. So I'm playing guitar, I'm singing live, and I'm using a little bit of technology to help me. So it's recorded drums and bass along with me, but they're me playing. So it's all me playing. It's really like four of me playing at one time.
One-man band.
Yeah.
And
So yeah, that's what I'm doing now, and I'm sort of I'm going to expand it to incorporate some of the other instruments I play. I play bass a lot, obviously. I play keys and Hall & Oates, and I play drums. So this is sort of the first solo experience, the guitar and vocals, but I'm going to be incorporating bass and acoustic guitar and drums into it pretty soon.
well, you bring up Hall & Oates. How did you
Yeah.
come to be with Hall & Oates?
Well, I was introduced to Daryl through Alan Gorey, who was one of the original members in Average White Band. So I was with the Average White Band for almost 13 years, long time. And they were friends, Daryl and Alan, from the early 70s, from when they were both signed with Atlantic Records, the early days. So I met Alan several times, like in the early 90s. He would come sit in with us when we would perform over in London. We were over in the UK and Europe all the time. And Daryl lived over there, so he would come and sit in. So I met him a few times back then. And I ended up subbing one tour on bass for them back in like 1996. And it was a situation where their bass player couldn't do it. I had 3 days notice to learn like 18 songs, something crazy on bass, and I was happy to do it. I had the time to do it, so I did that, and they were very happy that I was able to come in and sort of cover that spot. And I love doing it. I remember when I did it, I just wanted to put the bass down and go listen, because the show was so great. It was like one hit after another. So that was a great experience. So Daryl had made a couple of references that he was real interested in getting me in the band. So I sort of did the Average White Band for a few more years and decided that 13 years was enough time. I wanted to experience something else. So when I left the band, I got a call about a year later from T-Bone Walk, who unfortunately passed away not long ago. One of the original bass player in the band that was on Saturday Night Live, probably remember. And he said, "You want to come and do some solo shows with Daryl?" And that sort of led me right into the band.
Were you a fan of Hall & Oates before?
I wouldn't say I was like a hardcore fan, but I always loved their music, and I just remember hearing them in the 80s and just thinking, these guys are on fire. They come up with one hit after another. They're like an amazing songwriting machine. So I always really respected Daryl's writing and John's voice. And it's interesting because when I was in the Average White Band, once in a while I would get the seldom comparison, like I sounded a little like Daryl or something. So I guess there's some sort of, influence there.
Well, you mentioned you're a songwriter, and we talked briefly on air what it's like to get the audience reception when you have a hit. Is there some competitiveness inside you that you want that same reaction to something you've written, that you've created?
I don't know if it's a competitiveness, it's a release. I think when you gravitate towards music and you become a songwriter, it's an extension of you. It's like somebody that either paints or writes. It's a release of your energy in some way. So to me, it's like it sort of has to come out. And it doesn't really matter if I'm playing a little club for 20 people or I'm playing for 10,000 people. You know, if the people that are there enjoying it, I'm usually enjoying it. So it's really not so much of a competitive thing. That sort of comes with the whole business end of the music business. You know, people get very competitive about that.
Oh, yeah, and you kind of have to sometimes to get the royalties.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, of course, if you want to make a living.
As a songwriter myself, I understand the concept. I've always compared it to almost a kid.
Right.
You've created it, you want to see it grow, and you want to see
Exactly.
it become. What got you started in songwriting?
I was always interested in songwriting, and I think I did probably what a lot of people do. I started on drums, so I was a drummer for like 10 years. And I had, you know, as a kid and growing up, I had bands and we rehearsed endlessly in garages and basements and did the occasional gig. And I sort of, I hit a place where I was like, well, all right, this is not really going anywhere. I really wanted to focus on being a songwriter. And that was probably right around the early 80s. And I literally just isolated myself, and I built a studio, and that's sort of when all the technology was happening with keyboards and sequencers, so I really kind of dove into that head first to be a songwriter, so I could sort of really get a grasp of playing all the instruments. And I created a catalog of songs over the course of about 2 years, and then was able to get a publishing deal. And that was with Sony back in the mid-80s. And I had a couple other things happen. I had an amazing producer who you probably remember. Remember Edgar Winter?
Yeah.
Okay, well, Edgar Winter's bass player was Dan Hartman.
Uh-huh.
Dan Hartman wrote I Can Dream About You, and he also wrote songs for James Brown. And so he got me to play on a bunch of records. He sort of took me under his wing when I had no track record at all. I was still very new and I was just a local guy, but I knew a lot about programming and sequencing and stuff like that. So he kind of took me under his wing and put me on Tina Turner's songs, like a couple of hits of hers. So,
wow.
I got a good experience at, you know, looking over his shoulder and him being a great songwriter and producer. So, and that sort of coincided with my publishing deals. So I sort of got my foot in the door and did that for about 7 or so years as sort of like a staff writer. First with Sony and then with Warner Brothers.
Now, how does that work? You hear staff writers. Is it you come in at 9 o'clock in the morning? And
No, it's that's probably like the old idea of it. But what happened for me is they signed me as a writer, and that just meant that I had a quota of songs to deliver. So, you know, you get a salary so you can not necessarily have to work. You can just be dedicated to writing songs. And if you wrote a song on your own, that would count as a full song, or if you co-wrote, which I generally was doing at that point, that meant that was a half a song towards your quota. And so they would take the song and try to place it with other artists. And so I didn't have any blockbuster hits out of that experience, but I got a few songs placed to some artists in Japan and Australia, and one of the more exciting things that happened to me was I got a song after 3 months of just being signed to them, is Madonna put a song on hold, which
Wow.
meant that she loved the song, her management team liked the song, it was in the running to put on the Vogue record, I guess.
Wow.
That was the record. So it didn't happen, of course, but it was close and it was exciting.
Yeah, as a songwriter, I'd be more than
Yeah,
happy to have
exactly,
something like that.
yeah,
Just say,
yeah.
I like the song. I don't care if they actually record it. Just say you like the song.
Yeah, exactly. That was
good
pretty
enough for
cool.
me.
Yeah.
Now, we got to step aside. We have the community calendar coming up. We're going to talk more with Eliot Lewis and play a couple of tracks from his LP, Standing on Top of the World, on 97.5 WDCM.